This is not, and maybe we have to do a little bit of this is not what it often is described to be. For example, it's not a financial crisis. To put the adjective financial in front of it carries the implication that it has something particular to do with banks or credit or the things that go by the name finance. It doesn't. There's no part of our economy, and indeed no part of our society, as you'll see, that is escaping or has any chance of escaping from this crisis. So putting this funny adjective in front of it is an attempt to make it small, to make its impact restricted, and I think that's a mistake. So first, on the nature of the crisis. This is the second major breakdown of global capitalism in 75 years. The last one hit in 1929. This one is compared to that one as it should be. By the way, footnote, the Great Depression hit in 1929, and at the end of it is 1939. You should notice that it lasted a long time. The notion that the crisis is going to be over soon acts as though that's a kind of normal thing. A crisis as severe as this, if anything's normal about it, is it lasts a long time. So the notion that these downturns won't last a long time, they'll be over soon, recovery's around the corner, is exactly what you might suspect. A grotesque example of wishful thinking. Nothing more than that. What finally put Americans back to work, what finally got the unemployment rate down to what it was before 1929, was not an economic policy. It was World War II and the entrance of the United States into it. As a nation, we took half the unemployed people and put them in uniform, and the other half went to work building the uniform, which is a reason to believe it's not going to go away anytime soon. It's going to be long and it's going to be deep. How bad is the crisis today? Well, let's see. What is the unemployed number today? Right now, 15.5 million people. Unemployment has risen every single month since the beginning of this great downturn. Everything that the Bush administration did in 2008 and everything that the Obama administration has done in 2009 could not stop the increase of unemployment. By the measure of unemployed people and by the measure of foreclosed homes, this crisis is bad and getting worse. Now, much is done in our culture to make people feel as though if they have one of these problems, it's their unique fault. There's something wrong with them. It's very important that you understand that that's not the case. As people lose their homes, as people lose their jobs, as people suffer cuts in their income, they contribute less in the way of taxes. Well, if you don't tax and people demand more and less taxes are coming in, the result is to lay off people. 5,000 teachers are scheduled for layoff in California. Prison guards, crossing guards, firefighters, police, all are being cut. I hope I've given you enough for you to understand this is a very severe crisis. If you lay off 5,000 teachers, you're impacting the education of young people now, and the impact of that on our society will last for years to come. The same is true of all the other cutbacks. So we're dealing with a very profound crisis, comparable, as almost everyone admits, to the Great Depression, but who knows? How did we get into this? What does it mean? It's all the more powerful in our country because it's unspoken. Because in the 1970s or 80s or 90s or to this day, nobody talks about this. No one confronts it. No one asks, why did this happen? And we imagine that if it's not a social problem, it's just my particular problem, then I can solve it. I know what? I'll do more hours. Smart move. And not only me, the adult male in the household, but my wife. She's going to go out. She may have been at home, she may have been a housewife, no more of that. Some of you go to Europe and you enjoy lovely dinners with wine in an al fresco setting in some Italian town. What they have is time. They don't work like we do. And so Americans went to work, most importantly the women. They wanted to help the family. The point in fact is, if the family was going to continue to consume, to give its children what it had promised, to live the American dream, since husband wasn't going to get any more wages ever again, she had to go out. Americans turned inward in the last 30 years, but it's not some mysterious cultural phenomenon. It has to do with you're working too hard, you're stressed out of your mind, your relationships are falling apart, your intimate life is a disaster, but you don't want to see it in terms of the wages and the job, and that's what I'm going to stress. To keep the consumption going, to deliver the American dream to their children, they went on a borrowing binge, the likes of which no working class in the history of the world ever undertook before. And so in 2007, we came to the end of the line for the working class. They couldn't work any more hours. They were exhausted. They were stressed beyond words. In 2007, the average level of debt of an American family was 125% of its annual income. There is no precedent for an economic downturn of the sort we have when it hits a population as indebted as ours is. So the working class is exhausted. It can't carry this. It can't continue. And somewhere in the United States, in all of us, we kind of know it. Can't quite face it, can't quite say it, but we know it. The quintessential story comes to this apex. Have any of you wondered, where did the money come to lend all those Americans all that money? Who's the lender? What's the source of the money? Instead of paying your workers higher wages over time as they work harder and better for you, you don't. Instead of paying them more, which is what we did from 1820 to 1970, instead of that, we give them a loan, which they have to give back to us with interest. This is stunning. The only thing more stunning than what is going on is the fact that many of your faces betray that you didn't understand this. And I'll leave it to you to wonder why you never heard this before. What does that tell you about the society in which you live? They didn't want to understand, and maybe that's why you didn't know, that the reason their profits went up was because they stopped raising wages. They preferred the explanation, we are managerial geniuses. We should be paid 20, 40, 60, 80 million dollars a year. So they took a lot of the profit and they gave it, surprise, surprise, to themselves. You know, most of the moving of production to China took place in the last 20 years when all of this was going on. Here's a third thing they did. The mass of workers turning inward, remember the bowling alone story I told you, the mass of workers not only withdraw from bowling leagues and PTAs and trade unions, they stopped participating in politics. While they were withdrawing from politics, in was coming the profit money to reshape the politics. We didn't have a sea change of political opinion shifting to the right. None of that. Stop. And then the stock market collapsed. And that's the actual beginning of our crisis, March and April of 2000. Do you understand? The most important stock market in the United States is today worth less than half it was in 2000. In terms of the long term, the stock market has been in a depression for a decade already. The workers are exhausted, they can't work more, they can't borrow more, they can't keep up consumption. So then what happened in America in 2007 when the perfectly predictable happened? Suddenly, exhausted American families, indebted beyond what they could do, began to default. They couldn't make the monthly payment on the house, they couldn't make the monthly payment on the car, they couldn't make the monthly payment on their student loans, whatever.